Early History of San Diego Unit Number 6, American Legion by Mary F. Pendleton, Organizing President.
Yes, now right again. Now is this just right? One of the proudest moments of my life was when in April 1920 I was appointed by Judge W.P. Carey, commander of Unit Post 6, American Legion, to organize the first American Legion auxiliary in California. There was no state auxiliary until 4 months later, and all of our activities and all of our problems were advised and guided by the post. Our ideals were loyalty to each other and to Post 6. Our motive, cooperation with the post and the community. The records show that we lived up to all that was expected of us as an organization. The first officers were Mary F. Pendleton, President, Bertha Barksdale, Vice President, Florence Jones, Secretary, Minetta Parks, Treasurer, Maud Fagan, Parliamentarian. We had 100 members at the first meeting, all of whom signed the charter roll, and we grew annually, holding the largest membership in the state until 1931, when because of the consolidation of several units in and around Stockton, the Carl Ross unit stepped into first place, and we dropped back to second. Today, Unit 6 is still listed among the Big Ten of California, although at present there are some 16 units in San Diego City alone. Even though we dropped back to second place, we still had the largest membership in the history of the unit, having 463 members that year. Our membership has maintained a steady level, and many of the charter members have continued more or less active all these years. When we were organized, the question of dues came up. We decided there would be $1 a year, so that anyone eligible will be able to become a member. We kept our dues at $1 for 15 years, even though every penny of the dollar went for state and national per capita. One year when I was a delegate to the state convention in San Francisco, I went into our state headquarters. Someone said, Mrs. Pendleton, do you know yours is the only unit in the state whose dues are $1? I replied, we meet our obligations to the state and national organization, and we earn the rest by hard work, constant effort, and cooperation of the members. I'd rather have 2 eligible women at $1 than 1 eligible woman at $2. With the increased per capita and paper assessments, we've had to increase our dues to $2 a year, which is still among the lowest in the state. Our first work was to help the veterans in Cape County Hospital. This work we kept up till the gates closed. It's with satisfaction that we report that every request made from any veteran out there in the hospital was granted, even to securing a correspondence course in cartooning for a man from New Zealand, through the kindness of Charlotte Baker, a very dear friend. One day a charter member, Fay Davis, who was serving as contact officer for our unit at the hospital, went to pay her regular visit to the veterans in the wards. She saw a tiny baby in the sentry box. The mother had to leave it since no babies could be admitted to the wards. That gave us the idea of establishing a day nursery, which we not only established but maintained until the hospital closed down in later years. When telling of this incident at one of our meetings, one of our members came up and introduced a tall, fine-looking young man and told me that he was the baby in the sentry box. The member was Ethel Piper, and the baby was her son. Then came the problem of transportation. No bus service to Camp County. Our contact officer went to the Red Cross and asked if they could help us out. The chairman said they would take the matter up. But one of our members, Mrs. Stewart Lake, was also a member of the Red Cross board, and suggested reorganizing a motor car, which had been functioning all during World War I. This suggestion was carried out, and the Red Cross served us in time of need then, as it is today still serving when help is needed. The motor car made a fine showing all during World War II because of this suggestion years ago. When I went to the Red Cross board to thank them for reorganizing the motor car and giving us their assistance, the chairman said, Mrs. Pendleton, we should thank you for giving us the incentive. As a unit, we had an opportunity to return the favor when the Red Cross needed our help. One of our past presidents, May Pendleton, took over the task of distributing tons of flour and bread, later blankets, clothing, and other surplus commodities for the Red Cross, with the assistance of many of our members and other units of the American Legion Auxiliary in the city. Hundreds of veterans' families were assisted through the distribution centers that were maintained out throughout the city, who otherwise would have gone hungry and in need of clothing. No veteran who applied was ever turned away empty-handed. Our very responsibility was to help Post 6 at the time of the first American Legion Convention held here in San Diego in 1920, just 4 months after we were organized. The members of the unit joined with Post 6 in putting on a night in Dreamland in the old Isis Theater to raise funds for the convention. One of our charter members, Ida Morgan, was sent by the unit to the first gay convention in Fresno, again to the convention held in Yosemite, and as a delegate to the National Convention in Kansas City. Money was raised to pay her expenses by the unit members serving meals at the San Diego County Fair in Balboa Park. $200 was realized for this service. There was much that came between the first year when I was appointed to organize this unit and serve as its first president, and the year 1922 and 23 when I was elected to serve as the president for the second time. After meeting a few times in the Knights of Pythias building, it was learned that the community service quarters would be available. I was asked by the Legion to contact Mr. J.D. Speckles to ask if the Legion could have it at the same price the community service had paid, which is just a half the regular charge. Knowing where Mr. Speckles had his lunch, and I was at the top of the steps when he came up, and I said to him, Mr. Speckles, can I see you for 2 minutes at 2 o'clock in your office? He replied, yes. I was there on the minute and explained why I was asking his help, saying, the American Legion is an outcome of the World War, a new organization, untried and unproven, but hopes to mean much to the community. He said, I'll take the matter up and let you know. In a half hour came the word that the Legion could have it at the same price the community service had paid. Community service let us have the use of its equipment and furnishings, since our objectives were much the same as theirs. With the help of our unit members, the meeting hall was in readiness for the first meeting of the State Convention of the Legion, held here in August 1920. After a time, Post 6 said they could not pay even a reduced rate for the Broadway building, and they planned to move into some office building. The auxiliary had a meeting and informed them that they would pay the rent for 2 months, hoping by that time something about a park building would materialize. I said at that time, we can't afford to have the Legion say they can't pay the rent, but if there's a chance for the park building, then we could move and save the money, having an objective ahead. Just before this, the auxiliary had the food concession at the county fair in one of the park buildings, 16 days and evenings. Of course, I took the afternoon tea time as my part of the work. One day, Mr. Stuart Blake came over to me and said, Mrs. Pendleton, I believe if we tried, we could get the use of a park building. A committee was appointed to contact the park board, and they met without success several times. But the last time, one of the board members said, we have decided that all the buildings in Balboa Park will be memorial buildings. One of the Legion's committee members, Admiral Wells, was on his feet at once, saying, then we'll make this a war memorial building. Thus was our precious building christened, and we work began to raise $15,000 to restore it. All put their shoulders to the wheel, but that was a lot of money to raise in the 7 weeks before Memorial Day, when we hope to dedicate it. I said if the money is not raised, we will wait. In the meantime, I talked before clubs and state societies, advancing the idea of what a dollar contributed would mean. 20 cents would help restore the park building, which is so priceless to the community. 20 cents will provide park buildings, which a place for the Legion to meet. 20 cents will provide a place for the auxiliary to meet, to sow and do its part. 20 cents will provide the opportunity of raising money for the fast increase in expenses for the care of the veteran and his family. And the last 20 cents is your own satisfaction for being able to contribute. The weeks went by and many grew quite discouraged. But 1 or 2 of the posts said, we won't give up till Aunt Mary does. There had been the extra expense of a retaining wall made necessary for the seepage from the lily pond. and the night before Memorial Day the necessary sum had not been raised. A small black bordered notice in the morning paper stated that the hoped-for dedication of the War Memorial Building will not take place as the necessary funds had not been raised. At 8 o'clock that morning the phone rang, and when my husband answered it was General Marshall O'Terry, a next-door neighbor, who said, "How much more do you need, General Pendleton?" The general said, $5,000. General Terry replied, "It is yours. Mary shall not be disappointed." So at the organ pavilion at the close of the Memorial Day ceremonies, it was announced that an informal dedication would take place at the War Memorial Building at once. When the ceremony, which I shall never forget, closed, I took Stuart Lakes by one hand and General Terry by the other, saying, "This is the man that brought me the first suggestion of having a park building for our meeting place, and this is the man that made that dedication possible." Then began the work of restoration of the buildings. In June, Madame Schumann sang at the formal dedication ceremony. She sang "There Is No Death," and it was heard 20 blocks away. Soon after we had secured the consent to use the park building, I got a message from a friend who was interested. He said, "Mrs. Pendleton, how much of this furniture in the building you've been occupying do you want?" I replied, "All or nothing." So Temple replied, "Wait till I go to the Marine Base and get a truck." All of the furniture went up to the building in Balboa Park, and that was the first furniture we had there. All given to me from the building on Broadway they used by some other organization. One day this same young man met me on the street and said, "I want to give you $10 to use for something the Legion needs." I said it would make the first payment on a stove. In those early days, many incidents are recalled that show the hardships that our members underwent in carrying on, but prove that when there is a sincerity of purpose, we never falter and eventually reach the ultimate goal. I recall when Mrs. Maud Irving Fagan, the fourth president, was holding the first meeting in the new building. There was no water in the building, and we had to get water from the Japanese tea garden for tea. Many of us will remember it always seemed to rain when it rained. Number 6 was having a card party, roof leak. Not unusual to have shipped card parties and tables and dish bench, things to catch the drippings. Mrs. Burridge gave a tea on board her husband's flagship and raised $500, and the band from one of the ships played at our first party. It was during the same year that the San Diego County Council was organized. When Mrs. Jones was president in 1925, a motion was made and unanimously passed to set aside 25% of all our funds raised from benefits to be used as a building fund. That custom is still in effect, and each year a quite substantial sum is added to that building fund. All of the past presidents comprise a board to have custody of this fund and pass upon the spending of it. To prove how useful and far-reaching that notion proved itself to be, in the year 1933, the hue and cry everywhere was, "Tear down the park buildings." Every one of them needed repairs, and the city felt they could not afford to do it. Post 6 had many members out of work, and there was much work needed on our own building. Our auxiliary was asked to assist with funds to get the work done. This board of past presidents met and again voted unanimously to give Post 6 $600 needed. They hired their own members to do the work, and when the Park Commission saw how much could be accomplished with such a small sum of money, the cry changed from "tear down the park buildings" to "save the park buildings," and the tide of public sentiment was changed. The buildings all reconditioned, and one of the first World Fairs in the United States was held. One of the finest World Fairs in the United States was held in these park buildings in 35 and 36. Post members worked hard for 13 days and 13 nights to have the necessary repairs completed so that we could hold our 13th birthday luncheon in a remodeled building our funds had made possible. Mr. Harry Foster had been in charge of the construction work, and his wife Mary Foster was president that year. The work was completed and the 13th birthday luncheon held in our own building. The unit contributed an additional $200 towards the expense of installing a heating and cooling plant that the Post had secured. All of these 27 years, I have stood behind the ideas and activities of the American Legion Auxiliary. Many charter members who are still active represent the background of the future with all its problems, which I am sure will be met with the same courage and loyalty, cooperation and steadfastness of purpose we have followed all these years. Satisfaction and pride in that record is our reward. Individually and as members of Unit 6, our struggles and accomplishments are in our history book for all to hear. I do not have to refer to it to assure you that whether we have been called upon to lead or to help, we have not faltered in spite of the personal effort and time it has taken. We have celebrated many birthdays since the dedication ceremony, and birthdays are made to celebrate, but it's the achievements of the years between that count. Unit 6 has a fine record of achievement, and I'm happy to say I've been privileged to have had an active part in all their work all these years, having missed but 6 regular meetings. Of lasting tribute to the women's veterans of World War I is the beautiful grove of 75 California redwood trees planted in the northeast section of Balboa Park near Pershing Drive, dedicated to the women veterans of World War. It stands a living, breathing monument to their valor, towers of strength and beauty, whose grandeur will be enjoyed by generations yet to come. Members of the unit bought the trees, and they were planted by the park officials. Some years later, as a part of our community service program, a huge rock was secured and a bronze marker placed upon it. Also, roadside markers proclaiming it Redwood Memorial Grove were installed along Pershing Drive by the automobile club of Southern California through our unit's efforts and requests. I wore my past president's pin for the first time in Panama, and both General Pendleton and I were presented with Gold Life membership cards from the Postal Auxiliary upon the occasion of our Golden Wedding anniversary. I was also made a permanent member of the Executive Committee with voice and vote. During Mrs. Jorgensen's year, General and Mrs. Terry presented us the beautiful bronze memorial plaque, listing all the names of those who sacrificed their lives in World War I from San Diego County. As long as we remained in the War Memorial Building in Balboa Park, it was my privilege to purchase poppies each year and place in a golden basket in front of this memorial plaque. In June 38, Post 6 American Legion had an unveiling of a picture of their first commander, Colonel E.N. Jones. It was their 19th birthday celebration. On that same program, former members of Unit 6 Glee Club presented the unit with a beautiful painting of their beloved Aunt Mary, which was also unveiled with fitting ceremony. One of the speakers said, years ago a woman had a vision and inspiration of service for God and country and organized this unit in the American Legion Auxiliary. She's been the inspiration to us all. Her loyalty, her service, her faithfulness has spurred us on to make this unit one of the most outstanding in the state of California. The 2 pictures were draped with bunting from the reviewing stand when General Pershing reviewed the troops after World War I in Paris. That piece of bunting that draped the picture of Aunt Mary is now framed and hanging in her house. And now may I close with these few words from my radio speech made over KFSD April 3rd, 1939, when I said, within a few days we celebrate the 19th birthday of Unit 6, American Legion Auxiliary, and I'm happy to announce that we were more than holding our own, standing steadfastly together all these years, aims high, proudly carrying on the ideals for which we were organized, loyalty to each other, to Post 6 and to the community, and to cooperate with the state and national committees in carrying out the work programs outlined in this organization, membership in which is by divine right, fought for, bled for, and in all too many cases died for, a priceless heritage. And now our responsibilities grow greater as the years roll by, and we have not only to carry on, but bravely stand ready for any emergency that faces us to do our part. With God's help we will, and may the future as the past hold the many opportunities of success for Unit 6 is my heartfelt wish. And Mary Pendleton, oh no, don't have to say that, but
You have just heard Mrs. Mary Pendleton, organizer and first president of the American Legion Auxiliary of Post 6 of San Diego, California.